Matty, Michael, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
It is lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Mark.
It's always great to chat with you guys, and I get both of you at the same time, so that's even awesome. It's like a double bang for the buck. And we're gonna talk about you two collaborating to bring some greatness, combined greatness to the world. But before we get into that, let's dig into your backgrounds as writers in general, and lead into how we got to this project. I'll start with you, Matty.
Well, I am Matty Dalrymple. I write the Anne Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts in Lizzie Ballard thrillers. And I also write, speak, podcast, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the indie author. And I serve as the campaigns manager for the Alliance of Independent Authors. And I started my writing and publishing journey in 2013 with the first Anne Kinnear novel, The Sense of Death.
Wow, wow. So before that first novel, were you writing before that? Was it always a dream, or was it something that that sort of came upon you around that time?
Well, it was always a dream because my father was a writer. My father was primarily a short fiction writer, and he got some stories published back in the day in Collier's and Cosmopolitan when magazines like that often published short fiction. And so I did some writing. I took some creative writing courses in college, and I got at least one story published in a periodical. It was great because my dad was my agent. And so all I had to do was write the stories, give them to him, and then he took care of it.
Oh my God,
I
that's
never had to see the
fantastic.
rejections. Yeah, it was great. I only got to see the acceptances. But then I kind of set it aside for many, many years because I just didn't have an idea. I knew I wanted to write novel length works, and I didn't have an idea that I really felt supported an entire novel length of story until 2011, when my husband and I were vacationing at the Yellowstone Inn, the lovely historic Yellowstone Inn. And I started telling him a story I had in my mind about a woman who can communicate with the dead. And that was where the Anne Kinnear stories came from. And if you're ever going to write a spooky story, then the Yellowstone Inn is the place to get inspired by it.
Oh, that sounds fun. And is it true? Your publishing imprint, actually, is that in honor of your father?
Yes, my publishing imprint is William Kingsfield Publishers, and it is named after the pen name that my father used, William Kingsfield.
Ah,
It's
very
my
cool.
homage to my dad.
I love that. I love that. That is so cool. All right, Michael, where did it all start for you, sir?
I don't know if I can top that, but my name is Michael Ronn, and I'm the author of over close to 100 science fiction, fantasy, self-help books for writers. And I have a YouTube channel. It's called Author Level Up, and I publish writing videos with writing advice and all that fun stuff that writers enjoy to help them become the best versions of themselves. And like Maddie, I also work at the Alliance of Independent Authors. I'm the outreach manager, and so responsible for bringing in new people into the organization who should know about Ally. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. I love that. I love that you're both doing stuff for Ally. It's such a great group doing so many great things for writers. So, how did you get into the writing realm, my friend?
Yeah, I had a near death experience in 2012, and up until that point, I'd been a sometime writer. Like I hadn't really written anything that serious. I tried to get some stuff out to literary agents, but didn't work out. And I kind of realized at that point that life was too short, and published my first book in 2014. And fast forward, here I am.
Wow. And as I understand it, you actually are also a very busy person with multiple things on the go, and you do a lot of most of your novels are written with the thumbs, right?
Yeah, I'm a little busy. I have a few things I have going on. I mean, I've got a full-time job, a wife, a daughter, rabbit, turtle,
Oh, do they
puppy.
race, the two of them?
No, they don't race, unfortunately, but
Okay.
yeah, but they do have some interesting conversations. But yeah, and I managed to kind of do all that and even attend law school classes in the evenings and all that.
Yeah,
And I do
because you don't
and
have enough
writing
going on, right?
because I don't have enough. And like you said, I've learned how to write on my phone, and I do a lot of dictating, and it's fun.
Ah, good stuff. Good stuff. I'm curious about how you guys met. Did you guys meet? I mean, I know you know each other through the author community. Was it that? Was it through the Alliance of Independent Authors? Was it somewhere where one of you was doing a presentation or a talk?
Well, Michael, I know that we got the idea for collaborating at a Writer's Digest conference. We were both presenting separately but knew each other from somewhere. Now I can't remember the somewhere, but we had gotten together for dinner to chat about stuff. Do you remember where that originated?
I do remember, and it's funny because it's kind of what's one of those weird things of history. So Dale L. Roberts introduced us. I think
Okay.
Dale
That's
was
right.
on your podcast, and Dale introduced me, and he sent a nice email connecting the both of us, and somehow that ended up in my spam filter. And I remember seeing it, and then I didn't get a chance to respond to it. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to respond. And then I went off and did something, and then my spam filter took it. And then like a couple of weeks later, maybe it was maybe a month later, I was like, oh wait, I don't think I ever responded to Matty. And so then I had to go dig into my spam filter and reply to your email. And then we connected, and I think I was on your show maybe one or two times before we officially met in New York.
Yeah.
And then we hit it off famously. And then we were over dinner one night and we were talking about speaking and trading speaking war stories. And the idea of the book was born.
So, okay, this I want to get into. There's a few things I want to explore here. Dale Roberts, great guy. What Seth Godin would call a linchpin. Dale really loves introducing people. That's one of the things I love. I love so many things about him, but that's one of the things I love about him is he connects really cool people to each other, and then magic happens.
Yeah, he's like
Um,
the creative matchmaker of the
Yes,
author
he is.
community.
Yeah. So in New York at the Writers Digest conference, you had met online, you had had discussions, either podcast interviews or whatever, had met, but had never met in person. I really want to dig into the how did the idea come up? Because I've had book ideas where I'm hanging out with someone at a conference and we're having a few drinks and all of a sudden, bam. So was there any sort of particular spark, or was it just sort of a natural progression in the conversation?
I think it was the conversation just about our experience in getting to the conference.
Okay.
What were our best practices in terms of pursuing speaking engagements? What pitfalls had we either stumbled into and gotten out of or avoided? And, what experiences were we looking for? And just a conversation about that. And then at the end of Mark, this is reminding me a little bit about how our co-authored book came about. But at the end of that dinner, we both sort of said, man, we have a lot of information here we could share with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when speakers naturally meet out in the wild, I think they inevitably talk about speaking. And I think
Right.
it just kind of came up and we were talking about it, and it was a topic that we were both really passionate about and we could tell.
Yeah.
And the next thing, I don't know, Maddie, it was probably what, 2 weeks later, we had a very detailed and comprehensive outline of everything we wanted to write about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
Fodder,
happened
getting the
pretty
fodder
quick.
was no problem.
No, no, not at all. Not at all.
Awesome. Cool. So, From Page to Platform, How to Succeed as an Author Speaker is the title of the book. It is already available everywhere you can find awesome books, right?
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about the process for you guys. So you had the idea, you were talking together, and then a couple of weeks later, you had everything sort of mapped out and planned out on how this was going to release. How did you go about writing it? Was it dictation? Was it handwriting? Like, how did you divide up the chapters, etc.?
Yeah, Michael, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So we each had a few chapters that we were passionate about. So I don't remember how we divided it up. It was, Maddie would take these chapters, I would take those chapters, and we wrote them separately. And then once they were all written, we kind of combined them all together. And Maddie took the lead on that because Maddie is way more organized and detail oriented than I think I'll ever be. And we had a comment system, and we combined it all together, and then we would trade the manuscript back and forth. And to use Maddie's flying metaphor, Maddie would have the plane for a few weeks, and then she would give the plane back to me, and then we traded the planes back and forth and had comments with each other. And slowly but surely, it came into place. Did I miss anything, Maddie?
No, just that I anticipate a future book in our collaboration series on
Yes.
co-authoring because we learned a ton. I think that the
Yes, we
creative
did.
part was never a challenge, but the logistics could be very challenging. There
Yeah.
just isn't good software out there, I don't believe, to do co-writing the same document at the same time, which is what led to this this passing back and forth and the analogy. Normally I go for the boat analogy, but because I took flying lessons for several years, I love this plane analogy, which is that if you're at the controls and you want to pass the controls to someone, you'll say you have the plane, or they'll say I have the plane. And then you have to do this awkward, you have the plane, I have the plane back and forth. You're supposed to do it 3 times. What my flight instructor called the awkward exchange of control. But it is super important to say, okay, you're working on the master. I have my hands off, so you don't end up stepping on each other.
I love that. So you have the manuscript. I have the manuscript. You have the manuscript. Okay, we're good.
Exactly. You must
Yeah,
have taken
yeah.
a flying lesson at some point, because that's exactly it.
No, you're a good instructor. I learned right from what you just told me. So there you go. So okay, so let's get into this. Why then would an author want to? I mean, come on. A lot of authors are introverts. They're like, they prefer to hide behind the keyboard, the pen, the microphone, whatever it is, and do their creative work in private or in quiet or in solitude. So what's the benefit of an author being a speaker?
Well, in all the books that I've had a part in, I always feel like understanding one's goals is very important, and the goals can be different. Like, we describe sort of a host of goals that people might have, and then talk about our own. I know for myself, my goal was to get my name out there, earn some money as another stream of income of my writing and publishing business, adding speakers fees to that stream of income, um, networking. I think those were my primary goals, and so that was what attracted me to it. And then I formed the plan I developed in order to pursue those specific to those goals.
Yeah, and we have a section in the book about the speaking goals and fleshing that out more. I think the one of the main reasons I got into it was it just helped me stand out. I enjoyed, up until becoming a writer, I took public speaking classes and all that, and I enjoyed being on stage despite being a textbook introvert. And I found that I was pretty good at it, and I found that people asked me to come speak and do different things. And so it was a skill that I already had that I just wanted to develop. And it's a skill that made me stand out because, Mark, as you pointed to, a lot of writers are introverts. And so it's typically expected for most people to not want to get up on a stage. And so
Right.
if you're one of those rare creatures with some sort of weird brain disease like Matty and I have, where we don't mind getting up on stage, then that makes you stand out. And
Right.
it leads to opportunities and opens doors that you couldn't even dream of. And so that's another reason.
Okay. I often said, so it's kind of funny. I'm way more comfortable on a stage than I am walking into a room and having to strike up conversation with even people I know, because I can find it overwhelming because I know, like, so for example, I might see Maddie's over there and Michael's over there and some other person I know is there and some other person I know is there. I walk in and I go, I don't know who I should go talk to. I have this social uncomfortableness of, well, if I go and talk to this person but not that person, I've insulted them, and I get this anxiety. But when I'm on stage, my goal is to provide value for the audience, and I usually know what the topic is. Usually, when you're doing a talk, there's a specific content that you want to deliver and value you want to give. But also, I think one of the things I recognized as well is we're storytellers. We love telling stories, whether it's the fictional stuff that we write or as a orator on stage. You're trying to you're telling a story in some way. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure. I think the storytelling aspect is the key strength that writers bring to a speaking career. But I also think that, Mark, you're excellent at this, that another key aspect is making it a conversation. And I've seen you speak, to large groups of people, but it always feels like a conversation. And being able to engage with people, if you're speaking to a group of 5 people, you're speaking to a group of 500 people, being able to have each of those people feel like they're having a conversation with you is a real key to success, in addition to the storytelling aspect.
Cool. So, all right. How does a writer how does a writer work? I mean, if it's in their goals, if it's something that they want to do, how does a writer get from page to stage? What are some of the strategies that you would advise to writers in terms of? I mean, I guess I think we've kind of covered why one might want to do it, but but it's also so Michael, you talked about reach, right? You stood out. I remember 20 books to 50K years ago. I think it was the first time I had ever heard of you or seen you, and you were on stage, and the minute you got up there and opened your mouth and started talking, I just fell in love. I was just held in awe of this magnificent speaker who basically had the whole room in the palm of his hands. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy. This guy's really cool. And of course, I've then recommended you to other conferences and stuff like that. But so that's one of the whys, right? You stand out, and suddenly you're known where I had never heard of you before, which is the case for most of us. We're unknown to most of the world, right? But what are some of, I guess, some of the other reasons to do it, and then some of the strategies that you guys may want to advise authors if they think that's something they want to try out?
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words, Mark. And 20 Books was one of the first speaking events that I had. It was certainly the
Really?
largest speaking event that I had up until that point.
And that
And
was like 800 or 900 people in that room.
it was a
I
lot of
remember.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a lot of people. It was like shaking in your boots on the stage before they call your name kind of people. Um, but yeah, if you want to do it, what I always recommend, and honestly, this is what I did to get that gig, dress for the job that you want. And that's kind of a cliche, but there happened to be an opportunity. Craig Martell posted that they were looking for people. This is back when he did that. They don't do that anymore. They didn't do it near the end. But I was like, oh, well, that would be kind of a cool opportunity. I think that would be nice. And so what I did is I put together a page on my site, and I put together a like a speaker's reel, like a video. It was a cut of all my best moments on my YouTube channel that would show what it would look like if I were to be a speaker. And then I put in my bio, and I put in topics that I could speak about, and I made the page as professional as possible. And I sent that to Craig, and Craig was like, "You're in. Good luck." and so I realized, okay, that's actually really a good idea just to do in general. Dress for the job you want, right? So maybe you've never spoken on stage before. What can you put together that would show people what you're like, how professional you are, and have a page like that on your site, and that's a page you can send people to. And as you start to get speaking gigs, see if you can record parts of those, and you can put those on your site as well. And that's a good start. And maybe put together a mock presentation of a couple of slides, and just, even if you're not a professional speaker, pretend that you're a professional speaker. We talk about it all the time, right? Fake it until you make it,
Right.
and amazing things can happen.
Yeah,
Maddie, what are your thoughts?
I think the other thing I'd add is that for people who aren't quite as willing to jump into the deep end as you were, presenting to hundreds and hundreds of people at 20 books, there's sort of a progression you can work through. If you're uncomfortable, if you like the idea of being an author speaker, but you're kind of uncomfortable about it, things like starting with podcast interviews can be a good entree, because, here I am. I can think that it's just me chatting with Michael and Mark, and I don't have to worry about the number of people who are going to be watching this later on or listening to this later on. And so it can be a more comfortable entree. At the same time, when you have to kind of trick your brain two ways. One is that, oh, it's just me chatting with a host or with two other people. And you have to realize that it is in fact something that is going to be going out to hundreds of people, thousands of people. And so you have to bring the same level of professionalism, regardless of the format, regardless of whether it's live or recorded, regardless of all those other things. But it can just bring an emotional sense of comfort to start with an audience of, it seems like, two when you're doing it.
I like that. And of course you both have podcasts, YouTube channels, etc. as well. So you guys have, well, I mean, you do both, right? Obviously you do stage stuff, but it did start with Michael, you had mentioned YouTube, and Matty, it started with your podcast before you did your first in-person speaking, right?
Well, I had done small speaking engagements, smaller scale speaking engagements early on
Okay.
to like local writers groups and things like that.
Okay.
And I had had a certain amount of speaking experience from my previous life in the corporate world. And so that was something that wasn't unfamiliar to me. Even when I started, I had that basis to go on and then pitch myself for bigger more prestigious in-person large audience speaking engagements.
Cool. Maybe, well, go ahead, Michael. Looks like you were going to say add something.
I was going to add the same thing, that I had done a couple of, like Matty, I had done a couple of things on
Right.
stage, and I was fairly comfortable being on a stage, and that helped the transition into being an author speaker.
Okay. So, and when talking about the pitch earlier, Michael, you had talked about, I put together a page and here are some topics I could speak of. And one of the sections in your book is the types of talks, and it's not the usual suspects. Can you guys elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. There's a few different types of talks, and Maddie, you tell me if I forget one, because I know I'm gonna forget a few. But the type of talk that most people would be doing if you're going to be an author speaker would be just your typical presentation, where you're up on stage, you give the information, people can ask questions if they want. That's typically what people think of classically when they think of speaking. But there are also other types of speaking events as well, and some that could be easier to break into, like for example, panels. So you could be on a panel with other people, and that takes the pressure off of you to not be the one speaking all the time. Now, there are some panel etiquette do's and don'ts that we talk about in the book that Maddie and I were laughing about as we wrote it, because we've both been on panels that have been, for lack of a better word, dumpster fires. So so there's a right way and a wrong way to do a panel, but those are great ways to break in. And then there's other events like author readings. Maddie is really good at those, and then there's also other events like keynotes and things like that. But those are the three major ones. Maddie, did I miss any?
No, I think you hit them all. And I think author readings is a great one to highlight because that's something that a lot of writers have an opportunity to do pretty early in their careers, especially if they're connecting with their local writers groups, and those often offer opportunities to do that kind of thing. And it's important. It's an entree, but it's also important again to bring the same level of professionalism. This is a theme that Michael and I hit in the book over and over again. That if people leave with nothing else, it's the importance of maintaining a sense of professionalism throughout, and it can be a really good learning opportunity to do author readings because it illustrates for you the importance of complying with the guidelines and sticking to a time limit and providing the information that the organizer needs when they need it and how they need it, and showing up for the first speaker and staying until the last speaker, because there's nothing worse as a speaker late in the evening to see people gradually trickling out of the room. So yeah, author readings I think is something that people can really take advantage of and gain a lot of learnings from.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually when we finish this interview, I'm off to go do one at a local radio station in studio, hour-long program
Cool.
with two other authors where we each get 10 minutes. And yeah, so it's kind of like I haven't done one of those in a long time, pre-pandemic, in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys mentioned panels, and I think it's probably worth getting into this because I can imagine that anyone who's listening to this who thinks, okay, that's kind of scary, doing a keynote, doing a full hour presentation, just me, I'm not ready for that. Panels is a really great gateway into getting up there, getting in front of people, but you're having a conversation, usually with two or three, potentially more other people. Can you guys each share potentially one or two do's or don'ts? There's favorite things that it's like, oh, I just wish authors knew not to do this or to do that. Because I've been unfortunately been involved in dumpster fire panels, and I've also witnessed really painful panels that did not deliver.
Michael, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So I'll give a do and I'll give a don't. A do would be to keep your responses as concise as possible.
Okay.
Don't be the mic hog, but you don't want to be the EF Hutton either. You say one sentence and then you pass the microphone over. You want to give people some content here, and it also helps to not try not to say the word, "Oh, I agree with everything the other panelists have said." Just try to avoid that, because everybody says that. That's like the stock response. Just say what you need to say. Don't say I agree with everything that's been said. And I have been guilty of that myself. So that's the do is focus and even practice on having a very concise answer, especially if you can get the questions ahead of time. You don't always, but sometimes you
Right.
can. But practice a 1 minute answer, being able to answer things in 1 minute.
Okay.
The
I like
second,
that.
or the don't, the don't I would offer is don't hide. There's often panels where there's a lot of people on the panel, or panels where there's just a couple, and then you have a mic hog and you've got somebody that is capitalizing all of the time. And sometimes I find myself, hey, I really want to know what the person on the end has to say. They haven't really spoken very much, but when they spoke, I really enjoyed what they had to say. So don't hide on a panel. Don't be afraid to give your opinion. Don't be afraid to disagree with other people on the panel, because that makes the panel more valuable
Okay.
when you have dissenting opinions. And I think sometimes people are afraid to be disagreeable on a panel, but actually the participants love that, because that's why they're there. They're there to get different perspectives.
Yeah, they're there to see a conversation, a dynamic conversation, not just a bunch of, so what should you do? Oh, you should do this. I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. Okay, next question. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very fun. Okay.
Yeah, I would add I'll take this question from a moderator point of view,
Okay.
because I think that if people understand this, they can not only weigh whether moderation is right for them, because sometimes that is on offer as well, but they can sometimes act informally as a moderator, even if they're a panelist. So I generally only sit on panels when I'm invited. If there's a moderator who's that's their whole job. They're just there to be a moderator. And if you're thinking about being a moderator, you have to consider that, because in my opinion, moderators should not be promoting their own work. They should be focused specifically on helping the panelists give the best performance they can. So it's sort of like the most thankless job you can accept in the speaker portfolio is being a moderator. Also, things like don't be the moderator who starts with seat one and then goes down the row, and then with the second question starts with seat one and goes down the row, and then with question three starts with seat one and goes down the row, because the person at the end of the row is always going to have nothing to say other than what they said. Vary who you're throwing the questions out to. Also recognize if you as a panelist or you as a moderator have control over how many people are on the panel. Like, I generally don't accept panel invitations if there are more than maybe 4 panelists, because there's just not enough time for each panelist to give meaty answers to the questions. And as a moderator, if I know the panelists, I always throw the first question out to the person who either I know is going to answer in the way that Michael described, a concise, interesting answer that doesn't sound robotic, or they're not thrashing around about it. Or if I don't know them, I prep them in advance. Like, I'm going to throw the first question to you, and I'm expecting the answer is going to be about 1 minute long. So those are tips if you're a moderator. And then if you're not a moderator, sometimes you can almost work your way. If the moderator isn't stepping up as a panelist, you can sometimes step up for them and help control the dynamics of the situation to make it as good as possible for the audience and the other panelists.
And could that be, so I've seen and done this, for example, Michael had mentioned there's the person on the end who said one thing, and there's been a mic hog who's kind of taken over, and maybe the moderator isn't experienced enough to be able to get control back. I've actually, as a panelist, pointedly said, I'd love to hear what so and so has to say about this.
Exactly.
I mean, which
Yeah.
is, it seems kind of very,
Yeah.
like not a writer thing to do, not an introvert thing to do, but it's kind of like, no, that person did have something interesting to say. I'm curious what their opinion is, rather than babble mouth over here. Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't
And
say it that way, of course, but
you would think, but not say out loud the babble mouth part.
yes.
But yeah, you're serving the audience. You're serving the people who have come to the panel to make sure they get the experience that they signed up for.
Cool. One of the things that I've seen recently is I saw a panelist spend the first 10 minutes reading the bios of everyone on the panel. Then I'm pretty sure that most of the people who showed up at the panel know who the people are, or at least one of the people on the panel, they kind of know enough about them that they wanted to see it. So, is that sort of bad moderation etiquette where you're just like, oh, let's waste the first 10 minutes telling you something you already know?
Well, I think so. And that actually suggests another thing to me that we talk about in the book, which is the different types of bios. And I actually just experienced this, not on a panel, but in a presentation that I was speaking at a conference and I'd sent them two bios. One was here's my big long bio to convince you that you should bring me in as a speaker. And then my intro bio, at the start. And there was a woman there who was responsible for introducing the speaker. She started through the bio, and I finally realized that she was about to read my entire speaker application bio. And I just said, you can stop. Nobody needs that much information about me. But yeah, exactly. I mean, Mark, as using the word wasting the time illustrates exactly why you don't want to be doing that. Michael, what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree. I there have definitely been some panels where I think you alluded to this, Matty, and Mark, you did too, where the moderator's just not experienced enough sometimes. I've been in panels where there is no moderator, and that is something as a speaker I've started to begin asking for moderators or asking, huddling with the panelists to say, hey, who's going to take the lead on this? Because sometimes that can just be a recipe for disaster too.
Yeah. I've even seen panels that didn't actually have a moderator. And what I tend to do is I usually tend to take control, because one of the things I look at is, okay, what are we here to do? Let's make sure we give them what they have. And that's where you sort of take on the role of moderator, even though you're a panelist, so you do have things to contribute. But I usually, when I take that role, I do default back to I'm going to speak the least. I'm going to throw out questions. I'm going to pick on people in the audience who have questions to ask these wonderful people, and I'm going to keep my answers even shorter, so I'm not monopolizing the time. I think that sometimes happens naturally on those panels that are moderator less.
Yeah, and knowing that ahead of time, I mean, another tip is make sure you understand what you're stepping into
Yeah.
before you get there, because if the organizer has sent out the word to the 5 panelists or whatever, and it's clear there's not a moderator, or you've clarified that with the organizer that there's not going to be, then you have that time in advance. I've done this as well, or participated with other panelists who are doing this and saying, okay, let's agree ahead of time. We're going to, on question number 1, this person's going to answer first. On question number 2, this person's going to answer first. On question number 3, this person's going to answer first. Let's all keep our answers to about this length. Like, you can do that if you know in advance. It's when you show up and there is no moderator, or there's de facto no moderator because the person is inexperienced in that role, that it's a problem.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's get into, thank you guys. This is such incredible content that as I'm thinking, like, I want to send this to to everyone who does panels at conferences, organizes them. Okay, so finding and assessing the opportunities is also one of the topics that you cover. So, okay, all right, I have this idea, I have these goals, I have this ambition, I have these books, I have this content, this podcast, this YouTube video, whatever that I want to share with people. How does a writer go about finding those opportunities, and whether or not it's worth it in some cases?
Michael, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So first things first is, what are all of the major events in your niche, right? So where are all of the events at, virtually and physically? That's public enemy number 1. Figure out what all the events in your niche are, and then figure out what your angle is, right? So is there a particular talk that you can give regarding your book? Is there something you're passionate about? And then figure out what it would take to get into each of those venues. Maybe some of the events have a application process that opens up from October to January, right? Maybe some they want you to reach out to the organizer, figure out what that is, and then go about it and make essentially a very, very short pitch, right? So keep your pitch to a paragraph, 2 paragraphs. Keep it very, very simple. Explain what value you have to offer, what you could teach, and let the chips fall where they may. But I think the art of the pitch is the most important part. I think it's what people get wrong. First, either they don't pitch or they overpitch. They oversell it. They send an organizer 10,000 paragraphs of what they want to speak about. not realizing that organizers are some of the busiest people on the planet. They don't have a whole lot of time. So you've got just a very narrow window to be able to catch their attention.
Right.
And that's how you do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Matty,
think
what do you
that
think?
that's a good point. Going back to Michael, what you had said earlier about having that page where you had posted the best excerpts from your speaking engagements, that if you can send an organizer an email that says, I've looked over what you want to, what this conference is about. I think I understand what value you want to offer to the attendees. I think these three presentations would be a great fit, and click the link for each of them for a more detailed explanation. And that enables the organizer to just see at a glance what you have to offer, and then go for more information if that's what they want. Similarly, you could say, here's my one sentence bio. For a full bio, click here. I'm a huge fan of links when it comes to sending pitches, because it enables the reader to go as deep as they want to, or to just look at the first thing and say, oh yeah, that is definitely for me, or that is definitely not for me. And to continue this theme of professionalism, Michael has given some great advice on how to get those first engagements. And then I think it's how you conduct yourself in those engagements that paves the way for more. There are plenty of conferences that I've been able to be a speaker at year after year, because I make the experience as good as possible for the organizers. If they need something by the first, I send it to them by the first. If they want a 100-word bio, I send them a 100-word bio. If they want the presentation uploaded to a Dropbox, I upload the presentation to the Dropbox. I don't say, well, I already emailed it to you, so I'm not going to upload it to the Dropbox. No,
Right.
you're just, don't go to all the trouble of finding and pitching yourself to the opportunities in your niche, and then shoot yourself in the foot by leaving a bad taste in the mouth of the organizers by not complying with what they're looking for.
I like
I,
that.
I'm going to go out on I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say that there's always a prima donna at every event you go to. There's always somebody that's either they don't have their stuff together, or they're difficult to work with. Don't be that person, and you will automatically, the organizers will appreciate you. You don't want to be that person, or either of those people. If you
Right.
can do that, that's the bare minimum to either get yourself invited back, or to get yourself, spoken about highly to other organizers, because organizers do talk. So just avoid that advice, or follow that advice, and it's just amazing what sort of things can happen in your career.
And that kind of leads, so that's sort of like the pre and then the during. But then there's also an element in your book where you talk about it's not over once you step off the podium, like once you leave the podium. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you've got the beginning, the during, and then the post.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
when
think
you
the
step
example.
go
Oh,
go
go ahead,
go
Michael.
ahead, Matty. You take it first.
Well, I was going to say that the experience we had at Writer's Digest, where um, we're having this great networking opportunity, we're chatting about this opportunity to co-author a book, and then if we both went home and moved on with our lives without ever looping back on that, then we would have never had a book, and possibly another book in the works. So acting on those connections that you're getting is key.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and also, once you step off the stage, answer people's questions. So often people will have questions after the opportunity, and spend the time to answer their questions. Spend the time continuing to be a spectator and a participant in the other events of the talk. Don't just be the speaker that shows up, gives your speech, and then gets on a plane and goes home, to the extent that you can avoid that. And then also, don't forget to thank the organizer. So professionalism is everything. And from the moment you step on your plane, you technically have to be on, because you never know who on that plane might be at the event you're going to, right?
Yeah.
And from the you're really not off until you set foot back home. And so professionalism through and through. Matty has brought it up several times. I bring it up several times. We hammer it in the book until we're blue in the face, because it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I can imagine there's a writer going to a conference to talk. I'm going to do a keynote on respect and treating others with respect. And then you're on the plane and you are watching the person on stage talking about respect, like dissing the flight attendant and complaining, like, and leaning back in their chair and annoying the person behind them and just being
Yeah,
rude and belligerent. And you're like, whoa, dude doesn't live by the
exactly.
thing said on stage. No, yeah, it's true. People are always watching. So even when you're off stage, how do you interact and act with people too? I think one of the challenges I've had is at some conferences I'm scheduled back to back, and I have 15 minutes to get across whatever from the hotel from one room to another room to set up with my laptop and get the tech ready for the poor tech folks who are trying to get everything ready. And people want to ask questions, and I find it really challenging because that's where I usually say, okay, I'll be back after this. I'll be in this location if you want to chat with me there, or if not, here's my, email me. I'd love to chat with you. I mean, if I don't see you here, I mean, that's always a really challenge for me whenever I have the lineup of people who want the one-on-one because they maybe didn't get a chance to ask, or they were too shy to ask in front of everyone else.
Yeah. I think that's a great tip. And if you know that ahead of time, you know you're going to be running from place to place, then you can even say in your presentation, as you're nearing the end of your presentation, we're starting to run out of time and I have to run to this other place and I'm going to be at the cocktail hour, or I'm going to be, eating lunch in the common lunch area, or throwing open those opportunities that will be available to people.
Brilliant idea. I love that idea. Yeah, if you know that just at the very end, let people know that
Yeah.
so they don't think you're rudely rushing to get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right. So you guys have given such incredible, valuable advice. The last thing I want you to share with my listeners is where can we find out more about each of you online, and where can we find this incredible new book that you've co-authored?
Michael?
All right. Well, you can find me online at authorlevelup.com. That is where you can find my books. Maddie?
You can find my fiction work at mattydalrymple.com, and you can find my nonfiction work at theindyauthor.com, and you can find From Page to Platform, How to Succeed as an Author Speaker at all fine online retailers in print, audio, AI narrated audio, and ebook.
That is
Yeah, it's a
so
bit of a link, but bookstoread.com/from page to platform
easy
is also
enough.
a link too.
Easy
I had
enough.
to
Oh.
memorize that. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. I did have the honor of getting early access to the book, but this is definitely one I'm recommending to lots of writers out there. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.